Okay.
Back again.
It's another episode of the Cleveland Podcast.
Another exciting adventure into the abyss of crazy people from town.
Yes. We do live in a crazy city. But I don't know if a lot of people remember this or not. The old Cleveland State University killing of 1982.
Very troubling stuff. This is one that I kind of remembered when you gave me the topic for this week's podcast. I did a little bit of research on it, and it was kind of near and dear. And as we'll discuss a little later, I worked at Cleveland State for many years.
Oh, I didn't.
So I knew some people that were directly involved in some of these monstrosities.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that.
Absolutely.
That was a little surprise for me.
Definitely. Definitely.
Right.
So this was unique.
Yeah. Well, let's see if anybody remembers the old name of Frank G. Spisak. He was born June 6, 1951, grew up near Buckeye. Dad moved the family out to Middleburg Heights. He stated that it was getting too dark for him.
Okay.
So, yeah, they packed up and moved to Middleburg Heights.
Well, that Buckeye area back then was a Hungarian neighborhood. The Spisak or Spisak last name, definitely Hungarian.
Right, yeah, I don't know. Is it Spisak or Spisak?
I've heard it pronounced both ways.
So far, I always said Spisak or Spisak.
But yeah, that Buckeye area, all old Hungarian town, through the 70s, I want to say.
Yeah, that makes about sense.
Late 60s, early 70s, and then they moved to Middleburg Heights, very suburban,
right?
Not quite a bedroom community because there was some industry there, but
yeah,
close to Hopkins Airport.
That was pretty desolate there at that time.
Yeah, not a whole lot going on.
No,
but, some tract housing that was built in the late 60s there, so
right.
Yeah, definitely time to move. So he had to have moved to what? How old was he? Probably in his early teens, late teens?
Yeah, probably early teens.
Okay.
Because, yeah, they said, like, during high school, he was very nerdy. Mm-hmm. You know, he was a member of the chess club.
Okay.
Which, that's a stereotype.
Yeah, it is. You know, nowadays it's much more acceptable because, you know,
right.
The Zuckerbergs of the world have all did that.
Exactly.
You know?
Right.
But back then, yeah, sure, that was a nerdy hobby.
Right. So, yeah, that was his, like, high school years.
Okay.
He had curly hair, you know, very...
Just awkward overall.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, your typical nerd, you know.
You know, and those were the years way before, you know, bullying was something that, you know,
right.
people cared about. It was just a fact of life. There's going to be jerks in school. And
right, yeah, it gets thick skin, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, after high school, he entered Cleveland State University, but he dropped out because he couldn't afford it.
Okay.
So he started his own education curriculum as he was working in a bookstore downtown.
Okay.
But most of his curriculum was filled with Hitler and the Nazi Party and all that.
It's pretty specific.
Yeah, it really was, you know, but yeah, that's what he did there.
So, you know, pre-internet days, again, just books on books on books of, you know, Hitler and Goering and you know, Rudolf Hess and, you know, all these monsters. And, you know, at that time, those books were everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
They're a bit more few and far between now. You can still find them, but yeah, I mean, you had to like look for things like that.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. It was a chore.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Using the old Dewey Decimal System.
Absolutely.
He did date and all that. He actually got married at the age of 22.
Okay, young.
Yeah. They had a daughter, Sally Ann. Mm-hmm. He married a lady named Laverne.
Okay.
But in his 20s there, he was still obsessed with Hitler, and he would play like recordings of Hitler's speeches. And
of which very few actually exist.
Right.
Many people say that there's only 2 or 3 recordings of actual Hitler's voice, and there were voiceovers, you know, during that time.
Right, but yeah, I guess he would blare this in their apartment house, which was at 1367 East 53rd. The building's still there.
Okay.
It's between Superior and St. Clair.
Okay.
there's like, I believe there's a Victory Garden just like south of it. Not Victory, but a community garden.
Yeah, there's still quite a bit of housing there. That's a mix of housing and industrial.
Right, there's a lot more industrial over
there. At the time, again, back then, late 70s, early 80s, it was cheaper to live downtown.
Right.
There was the suburban crawl that was starting to go on, and cities like Parma and Garfield Heights, Maple Heights were kind of getting much more populated. So, yeah, not down in the dumps, but still.
Right. It's not a nice...
low middle class back then, I would say.
Right. Then when he was 25, he got involved in a car accident and he suffered a pretty bad head injury.
Oh, that could be an answer for a lot of the future questions.
That's what his wife blamed it on. She said shortly after that, he started acting all weird and all that after the car accident. Her quote was, he was messed up in the head,
Well, prior to delving into, his future horrifying acts, I mean, even prior to the car accident, okay, we've already got that he was bullied.
Right.
We've already got that he had this fascination or weird thing going on with Nazis, the occult, and Hitler.
Right.
So there's 2 strikes against you.
Right. And then now coupled with a head injury.
Head injury, yeah.
And after the head injury, then too, he started cross-dressing.
Well, that's a jump.
Yeah. And at night, he would start working as a prostitute, turning tricks.
So he was a pre-op transvestite who worshipped Hitler.
Yes.
And was actively prostituting himself.
Yes. Our very own Dog Day Afternoon.
Very much so.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was...
Well, this was before the AIDS crisis, so risky, sure.
Yeah.
But just overall dangerous.
Right,
I mean,
right.
Prostitution is a very dangerous thing.
Absolutely.
Especially, here's one, again, transvestite, transsexual, but then you have claws. I'm sure he was tricking himself to men.
Right, yeah.
That's even more dangerous because these guys are closeted and don't want witnesses or
right.
Who says they're not going to cave your head in with a pipe wrench, after doing the deed to keep everything quiet?
Exactly.
There's so many crimes that occur in and around, out of the way gay bars and stuff like that because, it might be a father of 4 that's down there and living his secret life. And then, that's when they get robbed, mugged, or beaten up because they're not going to go to the police and say, hey, I got to go kiss my kids goodnight when I get home.
Right.
Very creepy stuff.
Right. But, so he started cross-dressing, worked as a prostitute.
And he was doing the full female regalia,
full female.
Dress, wig,
lipstick, everything. Yeah.
Wow.
He was calling himself Frankie Ann. He went even as far as to have it changed on his license.
Wow.
Yeah. And then he started seeing doctors and all that. He just wanted hormones, and he actually wanted to go through the whole surgery and all that. But, of course,
Again, this is the early days.
Right, yeah, he couldn't afford it,
Yeah, flight to Thailand even back then to go get the operation done was a fortune.
And so one day he came home with another transvestite.
Okay.
Brought him home to the family house.
Oh boy.
Was taking him into the back room, and the wife's like, it's either him or me.
Who'd he pick?
He didn't pick her.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so they filed for divorce in July of 80.
Okay.
It was finalized in March of 81. This is when he started to dress fully like a woman.
Out in public,
public.
Just no qualms about
it. Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He called himself Frankie Ann, talked to psychiatrists or psychologists, about having a sex change, wanted the hormone treatments, but he couldn't afford it. People in the neighborhood would just start mocking him, doing the wolf calls and stuff like that, supposedly, and he didn't like that, but...
to take an awkward guy...
Right, and then just...
proudly be even more awkward.
Exactly.
Recipe for disaster.
Right. Well, then he began to hate himself as a transvestite as well.
Very confused, and oftentimes, all right, so again, let's count the deck here. Okay, right. So we've got the bullied in school, the fascination with Hitler, the Nazis, and all the bad juju going on with that.
Right.
and now an awkward transvestite
right.
prostituting himself, and we'll call him with the whole gender
right. Whatever. He's still a man. He
was born a man and
right.
he died a man.
Right.
But wow, yeah, he's really that's pushing back waves. I mean,
oh, absolutely.
He's got and the head injury.
Yes.
I mean,
right.
Who knows what it is? Swollen brain or
I mean, my dad had a tumor in his brain, and he was off big time.
Sure.
And it's like, yeah, I mean, you start poking around in the brain and all that, and
flip some switches, forget to set them back.
Yeah,
for sure.
And so he began hating himself. Didn't want to be a cross-dresser no more, so he got more involved into the Nazi party. He started wearing military garb and all that. Then he became like extreme racist too. Didn't like the blacks, didn't like the Jews. And ironically, he was dating a female black prostitute then.
And this was not a transvestite or transsexual.
This was a legitimate woman that he was dating. So, I don't know. I guess a few things snapped in his head. He thought that God sent him down to abolish the blacks and the Jews, and he wanted to start a race war in Cleveland.
Okay.
So on February 1st, 1982, he was at Cleveland State Library, the first floor of the Rhodes Tower.
Okay.
He went into the bathroom where he saw some feet in a stall. Allegedly, I don't know if it came out in court or what, but he was trying to solicit the guy for sex.
Okay.
And that guy wasn't having it,
He was legitimately trying to use a library bathroom for something else than sex, which is rare.
Yes, it is. In this day and age, yes.
Right.
So, it was a Reverend Horace Rickerson.
Okay.
I guess he was peeking in the stall. He saw he was a black man, and he stated that he just pointed the gun into the stall and just fired.
Without provocation.
Right. Right.
Guy told him to move on.
Right. So
that was that.
He ended up killing this reverend, he fled the area to the snack area and had coffee like it was nothing.
Wow.
And then he came back downstairs to see his work. Well, when he was doing that, he caught the eye. This one guy was kind of staring at him. Okay. And in his mind, he thought that he knew that he killed this guy.
Okay.
But he ended up leaving and nothing came of that one.
Okay.
So it was under investigation. Nobody saw nothing. Nobody heard nothing. So he went on his merry way.
Got away scot-free.
Pretty much, yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then in June of 82, he befriended another guy that was a Nazi sympathizer, I guess you would call him.
Okay. Birds of a feather, right?
Right. His name was Ron Reddish.
Okay.
Didn't do much research on him because
he's not much out there.
Right. Well, he's not the one that was doing it.
Right.
He was assisting and so.
Right.
So they would drive around in what they would call hunting parties.
Okay.
And they came across John Hardway at the bar. It was called the Black Horse Bar on Madison and West 117th.
Okay. Used to live in that area. I know the exact building.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Mr. Hardway would go into the bar, cash his check and all that, have a drink, and then go hit the rapids to get home. Well, he saw Spisak standing there in the street with a pistol, and he shot at him 5 times. Shot him 5 times.
Spisak shot him?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Spisak shot him 5 times, and he lived.
Wow.
Yeah. Talk about Superman.
I would say so.
Yeah.
I would say so.
Right. So he's got one murdered already.
Okay.
And now this guy's wounded.
Okay.
So then in early of August of 82, Coletta Dart, who was working at Cleveland State. She went and used the bathroom. And when she opened the stall door, Spisak was standing there with a gun pointed at her.
Jesus Christ.
Told her to get back in. Well, she pushed him.
Okay.
Knocked him out of the way, and she just ran down the hall. Well, he followed her. He shot once at her and missed.
Okay.
And then I guess a bunch of people came out of the rooms.
Sure.
And he was already gone.
Wow.
So she got pretty lucky.
I would say so, yeah. I mean, you think back then, 35 years ago, weren't any active shooter drills or anything like that.
No.
It's just you hear something and then your curiosity is
like,
what's that out in the hallway? And everyone kind of goes out. Now, it's under desks, it's locking doors, it's a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Unfortunately, you have to be that way, but that's the way it is.
Right.
So that was in early of August of 82.
Okay.
Then late August, like August 27th of the same year, Timothy Sheehan, who was a maintenance worker, that was the guy that Frank thought identified him from the first one, that he thought that he knew. So he was kind of stalking this guy,
Jesus.
And so he stalked him, and then he knew something. He thought that he was a Jew.
Spisak thought the maintenance guy was a Jew. Okay.
Yeah, so that was also another reason why he was hunting him.
Okay.
And once again, in the Rhodes Tower restroom, the guy was taking a leak. He walks behind him and shot him in the head and once in the chest and killed him.
So we're up to 2 murders.
2 murders.
1 assault and 1 attempted murder.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, boy.
All within, from February until August. Right?
And with the exception of the Madison and West 117th, it was all within a couple 100-yard radius.
Right. Yeah, they were all
a few feet of one another.
Yeah, he had a thing for bathrooms for some reason.
Yes, yeah.
And then 3 days after that, so we're now at August 30th, 17-year-old Brian Warford was shot in the head waiting for the RTA bus on Euclid just outside of CSU. He's just minding his own business.
This is hunting ground.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So a week after that then, so we're talking, first week in June, Spisak got a little drunk and started shooting his gun out of his window.
And he's still at this apartment over on the Near East Side?
Yes, East 54th, or East 53rd.
Okay.
Yeah, he's still shooting, he's still living there. And somebody called, police got him, went in there, arrested him, confiscated his gun. He bonded out.
Okay.
Because,
You could.
Yeah. Well, you could, and they didn't have any...
He hasn't been convicted of any crimes prior to. He wasn't even a suspect of any of this stuff.
Correct. Right. So, they took him down, and an anonymous tip came in about them to check the gun.
Okay.
Well, it matched on... I'm not sure which one it was.
Okay.
But it matched, so then they ended up, sending the whole SWAT team or whatever, out to get him. Well, he drove down to his house. He wasn't home at the time that they were issuing the warrant, and he went back to his buddy Ron's house, who lived off of 130th.
Okay.
On Carrington. Again, somebody tipped the cops off. Hey, check over there. He hangs around with this guy. He's probably over there.
This anonymous tipster is definitely someone who knows him.
I'm thinking it was his black girlfriend.
Yeah, I think so.
She probably had enough of this, but was too afraid to do anything because she's like, this guy's a nut job. You know?
For sure.
And I guess the neighbors would complain that the music was too loud of him, playing all the Hitler and the Hess speeches and all that. And I guess he would just blare it,
Wow.
So, so they surrounded his house, and then they went down and ended up picking him up at over there by 130th.
Okay.
And so they get him in court and all that fun stuff. So he was he was trying for the insanity plea. Mm-hmm. But his own psychiatrist couldn't even help. He stated that he had a personality disorder.
Okay.
and he wasn't legally insane.
Right, yeah, personality disorder doesn't make you crazy.
No, right, but I don't know. I mean, being God's own, what would you even call that?
I think he thought he was a messenger.
Right.
Of some sort.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
he was completely delusional.
Very.
And the difference between delusional and insane is an insane person doesn't have these beliefs. There's just a chemical mix-up with them. A delusional person believes so much in something that it makes them insane.
Right.
It's brought upon yourself when you're delusional. Happens a lot in cults.
Okay.
It happens a lot in some religions. And again, these are opinions of my own, so please don't sue me. But Scientology is a good example of that, where it's a structured society.
Right.
Acting as a religion.
Right.
More so for tax reasons than anything else.
Oh, I'm sure.
Where perfectly logical...
Right.
And what you would consider sane people believe that there's billion-year-old aliens that live in hollowed-out volcanoes who secretly run Earth. These are people like Kirstie Alley and Tom Cruise and John Travolta.
Right.
People that make millions of dollars because they are extraordinarily talented and on the screen and are good at something. You would never consider those people insane, but you would consider them delusional.
Right.
And rant on Scientology.
So when are we joining? No.
What's interesting is in West Hollywood, there is the Church of Scientology. It's an incredible building.
Right.
And you drive by it, and it's packed all the time, and it's just... weird.
Yeah, I believe it.
It's just so weird. And I've listened to a lot of, I know we're going on a tangent here, but I've listened to so many podcasts and interviews of people like Leah Remini, the actress who grew up in the Church of Scientology and left. And she said, yeah, it's just delusion.
Yeah.
They force feed it to you, and after a while, you just kind of get in the groove, and you're like, all right, this works.
So this guy was doing it to himself.
Exactly.
He didn't need a church or anything. So
he started off with, listening and reading and studying all the tomes of Nazism.
Right.
Nazism, when it started, it was a legitimate political movement.
Yeah, it was a third party,
Exactly.
and everybody jumped on it,
And then that's when it changed. After they all took the bait.
Yes.
That's when it's like, and by the way,
we're
doing all these horrible things.
Right. Then it's like, oh, shit.
Right. Too late to turn back now. This is clearly what happened with Spisak.
Right.
The car accident certainly helped it a lot.
Oh, I'm sure that had a lot to do with it, but
people who have these warped agendas... they're sexually confused, and they take their frustration out on total strangers.
Right, because they don't know how to deal with it.
They look for love and companionship and support and people to lean on in so many different places. When they don't get that, strangers become the enemies.
Right.
Another case of just sheer delusion.
Yeah. Well, so on September 17th, 1983, he had his day in court.
Okay.
Well, days in court.
Sure.
But this was the final day, and the jury sentenced him to death.
They deliberated shortly, right? It was like 4 hours.
Yeah, it wasn't long, I don't think.
I mean, the proof was in the pudding there. I mean, he clearly did this. He didn't try and put up any type of defense either.
No, other than the insanity, but like during the whole court process, he was like, ratting on himself, basically.
Oh, sure.
It's like, yeah, I did that one.
Yeah.
And then he would kind of like gloat about it, And after they would, the jury and all that handed out the verdict, he yelled out Heil Hitler as he was leaving the courtroom.
Well, what's interesting about his case is what I found online is his trial years afterwards became a major focal point in anti-terrorism law. These were considered acts of terror for a couple reasons. Namely, that he was doing this under the auspice of being a Nazi, which is considered a terror group even now today.
Right.
So what Spisak did actually helped law down the line. I mean, think of September 11th. Think of
a lot of things change after these events.
The kid that shot up that movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, that he was charged with terrorism.
Yeah,
for that,
right?
So I guess it's a combination on the acts and your beliefs that led to the acts,
right? And then, so he was sentenced, to death and all that, and it takes forever. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess in 1999 he tried suing the state.
For habeas corpus, yes. Habeas corpus, in layman's terms, is you have to be able to be released from custody in order to testify or appeal a case. And that's what he was looking for.
That, and he was also going for the mistreatment because he was going back to being a transvestite again, trying to...
Right. And the law doesn't allow for you to get the hormones or anything.
Right.
You have the basic necessities to sustain life.
Right.
Hormones aren't part of it.
No, they're not. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are.
So he was in prison 17 years.
Yeah, he was executed on February 17, 2011. So he was...
Oh my God, he was in there nearly 30 years.
Yeah, almost, yeah. And his final meal was spaghetti with tomato sauce, a salad, chocolate cake, and coffee.
And was he electrocuted or lethal injection?
Lethal injection. Okay. And his final words were, he did a reading of Revelations, and he did it all in German.
Oh boy.
And then stated at the very end, Heil her, which means like praise God in German.
Okay.
And yeah, that was the end of old Frank.
Well, as I said earlier in the podcast, I worked with some people at Cleveland State during this, few of them Cleveland State University police officers, and just how horrific all of this was.
Oh, yeah.
Back then, that was one of the early urban campuses.
Right.
So for this to go on really negatively affected enrollment and quite a few other things.
Absolutely.
The thing was, he wasn't a student at the time.
No.
And these were employees of the school who were all attacked and victimized, with the exception of the guy at the bar. So it casts a really long shadow on CSU and affected things down the line.
Yeah, I remember people who say, I'm not going downtown. Not with that guy. I'm not going downtown, And yeah, it was scary times.
Well, he's, certainly another colorful character in the list of
black eyes to the city.
Black eyes to the city. Yeah, people who have certainly disrupted the otherwise peaceful way of life here. This Cleveland gets a bad rap as being one of these hyper violent cities, and I think that's only because our population is so much lower than it was before. It's certainly a case of an amplified version of one bad apple spoils the bunch.
But he's not the only bad apple.
No, there's quite a few. And, what's interesting about it, too, if you compare Cleveland to, whether it's 50 years ago or today, the south side of Chicago is an incredibly violent place. Nobody stands out there.
No.
But for whatever reason, we've got some that have really taken the cake when it comes to making their crimes.
Let's just say we don't get a lot, but what we got is really good.
Exactly. Well, good. This is the second in our series of, crimes and personalities associated with them here in Cleveland, and we'll be bringing a few different ones to you down the line. Who else do we have up? Who else do we have on deck?
Who's on deck? Well, we have a choice here.
I mean, just recently, there's Anthony Sowell, there's Ariel Castro,
there's Steven Stevens, the Facebook killer.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's see. There's tons we can go over.
Love hearing those papers rustle. That means we've done homework.
No, of course I brought the wrong pad home.
That's all right. Well, we certainly know there's quite a few out there, so we won't be short on topics or information.
No, we won't. But thanks for listening.
Absolutely. Subscribe to the podcast. Check us out on Twitter and email us with questions or suggestions.
Yep, cleveland.com. That's CleaverLand.com.
We'll hear you next time.
Thank you.